Same pick, same format, 3 different strategies. In a 10-team Superflex, 3 wide receiver, half PPR league, we're seeing how the 101 looks when you go quarterback, wide receiver, or running back to start. Let me know in the comments how you rank these teams. So start the draft with Josh Allen. I have Allen as the #1 QB, but after the season Lamar just put up, there's definitely a strong case for him. Lamar's top 2 fantasy seasons are higher than any of Allen's #1 season. The reason I lean Allen is Superflex is he does provide a little bit more stability. He's finished as either the QB1 or QB2 the last 5 years, whereas Lamar was QB1 last year, QB4 the year prior, and has a couple seasons where he dealt with injuries. Now, with my second quarterback, I kind of leaned stability, selecting Stafford as my QB2. I love Stafford. I have him as my QB20, which is right in line with consensus. He was QB19 last year. He was QB15 the year prior. Obviously, they lost Cooper Kupp, but they bring in Devontae Adams. Offensive line dealt with a ton of injuries last year, and I think he's in for a really solid season. So for whatever reason, the computer doesn't draft a third quarterback, so otherwise would grab a third late, and given the build, would likely go for like a high variance guy like a Cam Ward or Sam Darnold. Now, at the wide receiver position, this is a very strong wide receiver room. I have Nico and Amon-Ra at the 2-3 turn, followed by T. Higgins and Garrett Wilson at the 4-5 turn. And what's fun about Superflex is you can get some insane players falling down the board when QBs are getting drafted so early. So I was able to lock in 4 wide receivers inside my top 15. I am nervous about Garrett Wilson this year in what should be a low volume passing offense. But give me him all day as my #4 wide receiver. And I love Jacoby Myers' pick because all he does is finish inside the top 30 and is consistently drafted outside the top 40 at the position. Not to mention Nico and Higgins aren't necessarily the epitome of health, so can start him with confidence should they miss time or be a nice bye-week fill-in. And then with Aiyuk, I'm getting a great player on a great offense that I can likely stash on IR the first month and hope he reestablishes himself as the #1 in the second half of the season. Now, looking at the running backs, I've got James Conner and Alvin Kamara. Both are getting up there in age. Both have had their share of injuries over the years, but you're getting 2 top 12 running backs when they're on the field. Now, TreVeyon Henderson, one of my favorite players in college football since his freshman year. I'm very bullish on him this year. I have him as my RB20. He was just one of the most electric players in this year's draft class. And then I took a late round flyer on Bashal Tutin. We know this is a very crowded backfield in Jacksonville, so this could easily not work out. But it's the only player in the backfield that this new regime has selected. And it was someone that their GM actually brought up in his interview this offseason. And we know what type of run scheme Liam Cohen cooked up last year in Tampa Bay. So definitely like him as a late round flyer, like a last round pick in drafts. And at the tight end position, it feels this year like it's either grab a top 3 tight end or just wait. And I waited and I still got Jonnu Smith, who had an insane run to finish last year. There are some trade rumors, so we'll see what happens. But a position that's so bad year over year, at least we've seen him be good in this offense. So final thoughts on this team. I like this team quite a bit. Allen is a massive advantage in Superflex, and I'll likely have the best wide receivers in the league. Running back, I would say, could get away from me fast if the 2 vets miss time and the rookies don't get the playing time I'd hope for. But the goal for me in 3 wide receiver formats is to start 4 wide receivers, so that 4th in the flex, and I feel very confident about that. All right, so team 2, this was a robust wide receiver build. I start off with Chase, Nabers, Nico, JSN. If those top 3 guys especially are healthy all season, they could all easily be vying for the #1 wide receiver in fantasy title. I am a little hesitant about JSN this year with a new coaching regime, new QB. But I will say his breakout happened last year after DK got hurt. Now DK's in Pittsburgh. And I just think he's an excellent wide receiver. And then Addison, to round it out, like he's more of a boom or bust week to week player who also gets a QB change. But I will say he has finished as wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 21 the last 2 seasons and has a current ECR of wide receiver 31. So again, an excellent player on a great offense, great coach. So love the wide receiver room, and that's going to be very difficult to compete with. Now, at the quarterback position, I've got Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. I have them as my QB 13 and QB 15, respectively. These 2 QBs are on lower pass volume teams, which I don't love, but in Herbert's case, we get a year 2 Ladd McConkey and the addition of Trey Harris for the Chargers, and we know when he needs to throw the ball and put the game in his hands. He's very good, and he will be very efficient. For Love, he sprained his MCL last season. He missed a couple games, but wasn't really himself for the rest of the way. Now they add Matthew Golden, wide receiver in the first round. First time they've added a wide receiver in the first round in a long time. And he's only a year removed from being the QB5 in fantasy. At the running back position, I'm sensing a trend here with James Conner. And then I've got Kaleb Johnson. So Kaleb Johnson is someone that I'm very high on this year. And I think the landing spot for him was just perfect. He is an outside zone specific runner, which is what they run in Pittsburgh and Arthur Smith's system. Coaches keep talking about how he's going to be a high volume back. And we see Najee get 250 plus carries a year, right? And Jaylen Warren should be in the exact same role as he has been the last few years. He's a great pass protector, good at catching passes. So nothing will really change there. And, Warren was way less efficient as a runner last season. I know he was banged up a little bit, so I'm not expecting his carries to necessarily increase from what we saw last season. Maybe a little bit in the beginning of the year as Kaleb gets his footing underneath him. But, Najee's rush numbers have basically been identical year over year. And so this just feels like the easiest rookie to predict in terms of volume outside of Ashton Genty. Now, Quinshon Judkins, I get as my third running back. He was selected at the top of round 2 by the Cleveland Browns. He can handle a big workload. He's a powerful back. He can also catch passes as well. Like he and TreVeyon Henderson actually caught a similar number of passes last year at Ohio State. And, they did draft Dylan Sampson in the 4th round, who I like quite a bit. But, we'll see how much he gets on the field and kind of what your opinion of Jerome Ford is. I think maybe Jerome Ford gets a little runway in the beginning, but I don't think the Browns have pegged him as, the future at the position. Cleveland was 28 in rush attempts per game last season, which isn't great, but they were 5th the year prior. Obviously, the defense was a lot better a couple years ago. So maybe they're trying to get back to that ground and pound approach with good defense. And then I handcuffed, Trey Benson with James Conner, then took another with Garendo, with the last pick. At the tight end, David Njoku is like my favorite late round tight end. His current ECR is tight end 10, and I have him as my tight end 6. Now, I'm operating under the assumption it's going to be Joe Flacco to be the starter. And he went off with Flacco in 2023 in a small sample size. It was 24, 21, 13, 14 fantasy point weeks to finish out that season. He was kind of a league winner at the tight end position, as I'm sure a lot of you remember. So final thoughts on this team. Wide receiver position is just so stacked that it's going to be hard for other teams to compete with that. I don't have a truly elite fantasy QB or a true rushing QB, which hurts a little bit. But they are very good real life quarterbacks in good offenses, which does provide me some peace of mind. At running back, I did handcuff Conner, and I did like Trey Benson a lot coming out of college, but he didn't necessarily show enough last year that I can confidently say he'll be like a must start running back if Conner misses time. Same story if the rookies don't get on the field as much or they underperform. So that position could get away from me. Final team, robust RB. So this isn't the way I like drafting, but I will say taking Saquon at 1, I decided to kind of just lean into that and see how it shakes out. I can confidently say this is my least favorite team, but let's take a look. So at the running back position, I've got Saquon, Henry, Achane. None of those guys really need an introduction. This is going to be the best trio in the league. And unlike my other 2 builds, the plan will be to start running back in the flex. I did take Jalen Wright late as a handcuff, and similar to Trey Benson with James Conner, although I liked Wright as a prospect, the jury is still out on how he'll perform if he's thrust into a larger workload. At the quarterback position, I'm kind of all in on Kaleb and May this season. Both got major upgrades this offseason at coaching staff, offensive line, playmakers, etc. But even though I'm all in, this isn't necessarily something I'd be comfortable with in Superflex because both are kind of largely unproven. It's kind of just the way the draft fell to me, but typically, if I'm taking Kaleb, even if I have May a spot above someone like Purdy, I'd probably go with a Purdy or a Goff type to kind of give me that stability. Now, at the wide receiver position, this is why I don't like waiting on wide receiver. If you're in a 2 wide receiver league, it's a very different story. But in 3 wide receiver, it just gets very tricky. And while I think these are all really good players, not having a single wide receiver inside my top 20 is a tough pill to swallow. I do think I did a good job of filling out depth at the position. I've talked about how much I like Myers. I think Ridley's in for a good year as they move on from Will Levis in favor of Cam Ward. Maybe Cup comes out swinging in Seattle, it's just going to be tough for me to compete with the other teams, like the ones I built in the first couple mocks at that position. So final thoughts. This is definitely my least favorite team of the bunch, but just shows really the importance of mock drafting. So going to be doing a bunch of these. If there's any spots that you want to see drafted from or specific builds, just let me know in the comments. And thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.